The warm summer breeze whispered through the hospital room as Hannah's eyes fluttered open. "I was somewhere else," she murmured, her voice trembling. Hannah's near-death experience had lasted a mere 8 minutes, but what she witnessed would change her life forever. As she began to recount her journey, a chill ran down her spine. "Tell them that my grace is available to all, but they must choose to accept it," Jesus had told her. Hannah saw souls standing before God's throne, their every action laid bare. This wasn't just a story. It was a warning and a message of hope. Are you prepared for the day when your life will be judged? The operating room hummed with activity, a symphony of beeping monitors and hushed voices. I lay on the cold table, my heart fluttering like a caged bird. The harsh fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows across the polished surfaces of unfamiliar medical equipment. The anesthesiologist's soothing voice washed over me, explaining the procedure one last time. But my mind wandered to the mundane details of my life. The pile of laundry waiting at home, the looming work deadline, the dinner plans with friends next week. This was supposed to be routine, a small blip in my otherwise unremarkable existence. The surgeon's reassuring smile did little to quell the growing unease in my stomach as he pulled on his gloves. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply as instructed, willing myself to relax as the anesthesia began to take effect. The steady beep of the heart rate monitor was the last thing I remember, a rhythmic reminder of my mortality. Then, the world began to tilt and blur. The voices of the medical team grew distant and muffled, as if I were sinking beneath the surface of a vast ocean. Panic gripped me as I realized something was terribly wrong. The operating room's calm efficiency dissolved into controlled chaos. Through half-lidded eyes, I caught glimpses of nurses rushing around, their faces etched with concern. The surgeon's voice, once confident, now carried an edge of urgency as he barked out orders. The erratic beeping of the monitor drove home the gravity of the situation. As consciousness slipped away, a strange sense of detachment washed over me. Fear melted into an otherworldly calm. I felt as if I were floating, untethered from physical constraints. The boundaries between myself and the world around me blurred, and I felt a profound connection to everything. The harsh glare of the operating room lights began to fade. Frantic voices and beeping machines grew fainter, replaced by a deep, all-encompassing silence. I found myself enveloped in a soft, comforting darkness that stretched infinitely in all directions. Then, a pinprick of light appeared in the distance, growing larger and brighter. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen, pure, radiant, and filled with an indescribable warmth that called to the very core of my being. As I drew closer, a profound sense of peace and belonging washed over me. All my worries seemed insignificant in the face of this overwhelming presence. I stood on the threshold of something far greater than myself, poised to witness truths that had eluded humanity for millennia. The brightness intensified, enveloping me completely. I found myself in a place of overwhelming light, so brilliant that it should have been blinding, yet I could see with perfect clarity. The physical world I had left behind seemed like a distant memory, a fading dream in the face of this new reality. As my eyes adjusted, I became aware of a presence beside me. Turning, I found myself face to face with Jesus, his eyes filled with infinite compassion. "Hannah," he said, his voice resonating with power that shook me to my core. "I want you to witness what is to come." The scene shifted, revealing a vast and glowing throne. Souls of all ages and backgrounds stood before it, awaiting judgment. I watched in awe as lives were laid bare, every decision brought into account. The weight of this cosmic reckoning was palpable, yet there was an unmistakable sense of love and fairness in God's judgment. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "Tell them," he said gently yet firmly, "that my grace is available to all, but they must choose to accept it." The gravity of this message settled over me like a mantle, and I knew in that moment that my life would never be the same. As the radiant light enveloped me, a figure began to take shape in the distance. My heart raced, a mix of anticipation and awe coursing through my veins. As the figure drew near, I realized with a start that I was face to face with Jesus himself. His appearance was both achingly familiar and utterly otherworldly. His eyes, deep pools of amber flecked with gold, held depths of wisdom and compassion that seemed to pierce right through to my soul. His face radiated a warmth that felt like home, yet there was an ethereal quality to his presence that left me breathless. Waves of light emanated from his very being, casting a soft glow on everything around us. I struggled to comprehend the impossible reality of this encounter. Words failed me as I gazed upon his countenance, 1,000 questions dancing on the tip of my tongue. Then Jesus spoke. His voice resonated with a warmth and authority that seemed to echo through the very fabric of this otherworldly realm. "Hannah," he said, my name sounding like a melody on his lips. "Do not be afraid. You are here for a purpose." A shiver ran down my spine as the weight of his words settled upon me. I felt a curious mixture of emotions swirling within me: awe, fear, and an insatiable curiosity about the truths I was about to discover. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why me? How can this be real?" Jesus smiled, his expression filled with infinite patience. "Faith often begins with questions, Hannah. It is through seeking that we find understanding." His words both comforted and confused me. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, even as doubts lingered in the corners of my mind. "There are things that must be seen," Jesus continued, his voice taking on a more somber tone. "Truths that must be understood. The journey ahead will not be easy, but it is necessary." I nodded, still struggling to find my voice. Jesus extended his hand towards me, a gentle invitation in his eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice filled with both compassion and resolve. I hesitated for a moment, the magnitude of what lay ahead finally hitting me. But as I looked into Jesus' eyes, I felt a surge of courage. With a deep breath, I reached out and took his hand. The moment our hands touched, a jolt of energy coursed through me. It felt as if every cell in my body was awake and alive, vibrating with a new awareness. The world around us began to shift and change, the brilliant light giving way to new vistas I could scarcely comprehend. Jesus squeezed my hand reassuringly. "What you are about to see, Hannah, is the truth of the Final Judgement. It is a reality that every soul must face, yet few truly understand. You will witness the weighing of souls, the reckoning of lives lived, and the ultimate consequence of the choices we make in our mortal existence." A mix of anticipation and trepidation filled me. I was about to witness something few, if any, living souls had seen before. The gravity of the moment pressed upon me, and I found myself both eager and hesitant to take the next step. As Jesus guided me forward, the last vestiges of my earthly existence fell away. The air crackled with energy, revealing a reality more profound than I could have imagined. Before us stretched an endless sea of souls awaiting judgment before a throne pulsing with divine energy. The diversity of souls was striking, young and old, rich and poor, all equal now. God's presence filled the space, an overwhelming force of love, justice, and scrutiny. Jesus spoke softly. "Hannah, you'll witness the true nature of judgment, perfect justice and boundless mercy." As the first souls stepped forward, their life unfolded like a tapestry. Every action, thought and choice was examined, along with the intentions and circumstances behind them. It wasn't just a recounting of events, but a deep understanding of motivations and consequences. I watched in awe as lives were weighed with fairness beyond any earthly judge. Those considered good faltered as hidden thoughts came to light, while some who had made terrible mistakes found redemption through genuine remorse and amends. The process was intensely personal, yet universal. Each judgment was unique, but guided by principles applying to all. It wasn't about tallying good and bad deeds, but examining how each person had used their free will, loved others, and grown. Some souls were welcomed into eternal joy, their faces radiant. These weren't just those who led perfect lives, but those who embraced love and sought growth despite failures. Others turned away in anguish, facing consequences of persistent selfishness. Yet even then, hope for redemption remained. Jesus turned to me, his eyes compassionate. "Do you see now, Hannah? This is why your message matters. Every choice shapes not just lives, but eternal destinies. My grace is available to all, but must be lived out in love and service." I felt the weight of this truth, terrifying yet liberating. I understood now the crucial importance of the message I was to share. As Jesus guided me through the sea of souls, a shimmering tapestry materialized before us. It pulsed with otherworldly energy, each thread vibrating with life and purpose. The intricate weave of light and shadow danced before my eyes, colors shifting in impossible patterns. "This," Jesus said, his voice filled with reverence, "is the essence of a human life." I leaned in, mesmerized by the tapestry's complexity. "Every strand represents a moment that shaped this soul's eternal fate," Jesus explained, tracing a golden thread. The tapestry unfolded like a living movie, revealing a life playing out before my eyes. Each decision branched into countless possibilities. "How can one small choice matter so much?" I whispered, watching a young woman hesitate at a crossroads. Jesus smiled gently. "Watch closely, Hannah. Even the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that touch countless lives." The woman reached out to help a stranger who had fallen. That single act set off a chain reaction, influencing dozens of lives in unforeseen ways. The stranger, touched by her kindness, went on to volunteer at a shelter, inspiring others to do the same. As we delved deeper, I saw dark threads weaving through, representing moments of anger, selfishness, and cruelty. The pain these actions caused spread like poison, affecting many. "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "How can anyone navigate life knowing the impact of every choice?" Jesus placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "That's why grace and mercy are so vital, Hannah. No one can live a perfect life, but every soul has the chance to grow, to learn, to love." We continued our examination, and I began to see patterns emerge. The interplay between justice and mercy was a delicate dance, each soul's journey unique, yet guided by universal principles. God's judgment was a profound understanding of the heart behind every action, the circumstances that shaped each choice, and the ripple effects that extended far beyond the individual. Jesus pointed out key moments that had shaped this soul's journey. A childhood trauma that left deep scars, a moment of courage that changed the course of a life, a betrayal that hardened the heart. And through it all, countless opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and love. Some taken, others ignored. As we neared the end of the life's journey, I felt a growing anticipation. The tapestry glowed, pulsing with light. The throne of judgment loomed before us, and God's presence filled the space. The soul stood trembling, awaiting the final verdict. In that moment, I saw every strength and flaw, every triumph and failure laid bare. The weight of a life lived hung in the balance. And then, With perfect clarity and fairness, God's decision was pronounced. It was a profound reflection of the soul's true nature, the sum of all their choices, intentions, and the love they had given and received. As I witnessed this, a startling realization washed over me. God's judgment wasn't the harsh, unforgiving sentence I had always feared. It was a mirror, reflecting the truth of who we really are and the lives we've chosen to live. As the previous soul's fate was sealed, Jesus turned to me with a knowing look. "Now," he said, his voice filled with both compassion and gravity, "you'll see how the smallest acts can outweigh grand gestures." My heart quickened as I contemplated his words, wondering what profound lesson awaited me. A figure stepped forward, radiating an aura of warmth and kindness. As their tapestry unfurled before us, I marveled at the intricate weave of golden threads, each representing an act of generosity or compassion. The soul's eyes reflected a lifetime of good deeds, but also a hint of uncertainty. Jesus gestured towards the tapestry. "What do you see, Hannah?" he asked softly. I described the beautiful pattern of charitable works, volunteer hours, and public accolades that seemed to dominate the fabric of this person's life. But as I spoke, I noticed a slight furrow in Jesus' brow. "Look closer," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. The tapestry began to shift, revealing darker threads beneath the shimmering surface. Moments of calculated kindness, performed for appearance and reputation, intertwined with shadowy strands of pride and self-importance. Just as disappointment began to creep in, Jesus directed my attention to a different part of the tapestry. Here, small, unassuming threads glowed with an intensity that outshone even the grandest acts of public charity. I leaned in, fascinated by these humble yet radiant moments. "These are the true measure of a person's character," Jesus explained, his voice warm with approval. I watched in awe as seemingly insignificant acts played out. A kind word to a struggling coworker, a moment of patience with a difficult customer, a small donation given in secret. As we observed, Jesus revealed how these small acts rippled through time, touching lives in unexpected ways. An encouraging smile prevented a tragedy. A moment of forgiveness broke a cycle of anger. Each tiny act of compassion sent waves of positive change through countless lives. "It's the choices we make when we think no one is watching that truly shape a soul," Jesus said, his eyes fixed on the tapestry. I felt a profound shift in my understanding as I witnessed more revelations unfold. A simple act of listening had prevented a cascade of poor decisions affecting generations. A moment of honesty, despite personal cost, had uplifted an entire community. But it wasn't all positive. Small acts of selfishness or indifference had equally powerful ripple effects. A harsh word spoken in frustration led to deep pain for many. A moment of choosing comfort over compassion resulted in a missed opportunity to change a life. As I absorbed these revelations, I began to understand the true weight of our everyday actions. Every interaction, every choice, carried the potential for profound impact. Jesus spoke again, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "This is why judgment is so complex, Hannah. It's about understanding the heart behind every action, the intentions that drive our choices, and the ripple effects that extend far beyond what we can see." I watched as the soul before us faced this deep examination of their life. Pain and joy mingled in their eyes as they confronted the darker motivations behind some actions and witnessed the beautiful consequences of their genuine moments of kindness. As the judgment unfolded, I realized that this process wasn't just about determining a final fate. It was an opportunity for profound self-realization and growth, a chance for the soul to understand their true impact on the world. As the previous soul's fate was decided, a hush fell over the ethereal courtroom. The next figure approaching the throne made my breath catch. Even from a distance, I sensed the weight of regret and sorrow, bending this soul's essence. Jesus whispered, "Hannah, what you're about to witness will challenge everything you thought you knew about redemption. Watch closely." The soul's life story unfolded before us. Flashes of a troubled childhood gave way to addiction and a life spiraling out of control. My heart ached as I watched this person's choices lead them further from the light. Theft, violence, and betrayal became common threads, each transgression adding darkness. The weight of their sins felt insurmountable. I silently pleaded for this soul, hoping for some spark of goodness to outweigh the darkness. Then, a moment of clarity emerged, a chance encounter with a kind stranger offering help. This tiny spark ignited something within the troubled soul. What followed was a painful but beautiful transformation. I witnessed struggles against addiction, steps towards making amends, and growing acts of kindness. The journey was far from perfect, with setbacks, but the trajectory was clear. The soul, now older, knelt in genuine repentance, pouring out years of guilt and shame. It was a raw cry for forgiveness and redemption. A brilliant light poured from the throne, enveloping the soul. Divine love illuminated every dark corner of their being. Years of pain and wrongdoing were washed away. The soul's essence brightened, shedding layers of guilt. Jesus said, "This is the transformative power of grace, Hannah. When a soul truly opens itself to divine love, no darkness can resist its light." I felt tense. Would it be enough? Could a lifetime of mistakes be overcome by this change of heart? Anticipation grew as God's judgment hung in the balance. I held my breath, pleading for mercy. Then, God's voice resonated. "Welcome home, my child. Your journey has been long, but you've found your way back to me." Relief washed over me as the soul was embraced by unconditional love, welcomed into eternal joy, not through good deeds, but by opening their heart to grace. As I marveled at this divine mercy, something shifted within me. Tears welled in my eyes, and hope filled my being. This redemption had shaken me, challenging everything I knew about forgiveness. I realized no one was beyond divine love's reach, filling me with awe and humility. As the profound realization of divine mercy settled over me, Jesus' piercing gaze caught mine. His eyes, brimming with compassion and urgency, seemed to look straight through to my soul. The weight of what I had witnessed pressed upon me, and I sensed that this was far from the end of my journey. "Hannah," Jesus said, his voice resonating with purpose, "there's something you must understand about the knowledge you now possess." My heart raced as I absorbed the gravity of his words. The ethereal courtroom faded into the background, and I found myself standing alone with Jesus in a space that seemed to exist beyond time and dimension. "You have been granted a rare glimpse into the workings of divine judgment," he continued, his voice gentle yet firm. "With this vision comes a great responsibility." I felt a mixture of awe and trepidation wash over me. The honor of being chosen for such a task was overwhelming, but the enormity of it sent a shiver down my spine. The knowledge I now carried felt like a precious, yet impossibly heavy gem nestled in my heart. Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch radiating warmth and strength. "The world you will return to is in desperate need of hope and understanding. Many have lost their way, blinded by the distractions and pressures of mortal life. Your experience here is a message that must be shared." As the weight of his words sank in, I began to comprehend the challenges that lay ahead. Doubt crept into my mind, its tendrils wrapping around my newfound purpose. How could I possibly convey the magnitude of what I had witnessed? Would anyone believe me? Jesus smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. Do not be afraid, Hannah. You will face skepticism and resistance, but remember that you carry a truth that has the power to transform lives. Your words will be a beacon for those lost in darkness, a reminder that every choice they make echoes in eternity. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination despite my fears. But how, Lord? How can I make them understand something so ineffable? Jesus' expression grew serious. Speak from your heart, Hannah. Share not just what you saw, but what you felt. The love, the justice, the mercy. These are concepts that resonate in every human soul. Remind them that their lives are precious tapestries, woven with threads of their own choosing. Every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, no matter how small, creates ripples that extend far beyond their imagining. As he spoke, images flashed through my mind. The soul whose simple acts of kindness had saved lives, the reformed criminal whose journey of redemption had moved me to tears. I realized that these stories were now part of me, entrusted to my care. Hannah, Jesus said, his voice taking on an urgency that made me tremble. You must convey to them the urgency of their choices. Each day, each moment, they are shaping their eternal destinies. The time for change is now, in the world of the living, where their free will can still make a difference. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into my very being. This was more than just a story to be told. It was a call to action, a plea for humanity to awaken to the profound impact of their daily choices. Remember, Jesus continued, his voice softening, you are not alone in this task. I will be with you, guiding your words and strengthening your spirit. When doubt creeps in, when the burden feels too heavy, call upon me. Your faith will be your anchor in the storms to come. As his words washed over me, I felt a mixture of honor and trepidation at the task ahead. The responsibility was immense, but so was the potential for positive change. I realized that my life would never be the same. How could it be after what I had witnessed? The harsh fluorescent lights of the operating room seared Hannah's retinas as she blinked back to consciousness. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the ethereal scents she had just experienced. The familiar beeping of medical equipment pierced the air, jarring against the profound silence that had enveloped her moments before. Confusion washed over her as she tried to reconcile the two vastly different realities she had inhabited in what felt like mere moments. Dr. Patel's face swam into focus above her, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Hannah, he said, his voice trembling slightly, you gave us quite a scare. We lost you for 8 minutes. 8 minutes. In the span of time it might take to brew a cup of coffee, Hannah had witnessed the profound truths of the universe. Her throat felt dry and raw as she tried to form words, to explain the magnificent and terrifying journey she had just experienced. I saw, she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt inadequate, trivial compared to the vastness of what she had witnessed. A kind-faced nurse patted her arm gently. It's all right, dear. You've been through quite an ordeal. Just rest now. But Hannah couldn't rest. The urgency of her mission pulsed through her, more vital than the fluids flowing through her IV. She had to make them understand. She had to share what she had seen. No, you don't understand, she insisted, her voice growing stronger. I was there. I saw the Final Judgement. Jesus showed me. Dr. Patel and the nurse exchanged a concerned glance. The nurse's brow furrowed, and she began checking Hannah's vitals with increased urgency. Dr. Patel leaned in closer, his expression a mix of professional concern and curiosity. Hannah, Dr. Patel said gently, What you experienced was likely a hallucination caused by the lack of oxygen to your brain. It's not uncommon for patients who have been clinically dead to report vivid experiences. His words stung, dismissing the profound truth Hannah carried within her. For a brief moment, doubt crept into her mind. Could it all have been a dream? The memory of Jesus' presence felt so real, so visceral. But how could she be certain? As the medical staff bustled around her, checking monitors and adjusting equipment, Hannah retreated into her thoughts. The memory of Jesus' words echoed in her mind. "Tell them that my grace is available to all, but they must choose to accept it." The enormity of the task ahead began to sink in. How would she convey such a complex and profound message to a world that was often skeptical of anything beyond the tangible? The next few days in the hospital were a blur of tests, concerned family members, and well-meaning friends. Each time Hannah tried to explain what had happened, she was met with sympathetic nods or concerned frowns. No one seemed to grasp the gravity of what she had experienced. As she prepared to leave the hospital, a mix of anticipation and trepidation churned in her stomach. The world outside these sterile walls suddenly felt alien and intimidating. How would she navigate this familiar landscape with the burden of divine knowledge weighing on her shoulders? Hannah stood at the hospital entrance, discharge papers in hand, staring out at the bustling street before her. Everything looked different now. The hurried passers-by, the honking cars, the towering buildings, all seemed both insignificant and infinitely precious in light of what she now knew about the eternal consequences of earthly actions. A sense of determination began to steel her nerves. She may not have all the answers, but she had been entrusted with a message of hope and urgency. It was up to her to find a way to share it, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. As I stepped out into the bustling world, a startling realization hit me. Everyone around me was sleepwalking through life, blind to the eternal consequences of their actions. The weight of divine knowledge pressed down on my shoulders as I navigated the familiar streets of my neighborhood. How could I make others understand the profound truths I'd witnessed when they couldn't see beyond their everyday concerns? The world looked different now. People rushed by, their faces etched with worry over deadlines, bills, and fleeting desires. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and shake them unawake. Didn't they know that every choice they made echoed in eternity? That the smallest act of kindness or cruelty could tip the scales of their final judgment? I tried to share my experience with my closest friends, but their reactions left me feeling more isolated than ever. Sarah, my best friend since college, listened with a mixture of concern and skepticism. "Hannah," she said, her voice gentle but tinged with worry. "Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you should talk to someone about what happened during your surgery." My family wasn't much better. My sister Emily suggested I might be suffering from post-traumatic stress. "It's normal to have vivid dreams or hallucinations after a near-death experience," she explained, her tone maddeningly reasonable. "But you can't let it consume you like this." Their well-meaning dismissals felt like a punch to the gut. How could I make them understand that what I'd experienced was more real than anything I'd ever known? The isolation grew, a chasm widening between me and the people I loved most. As days turned into weeks, I found myself hyper-aware of the hidden currents of grace and judgment flowing through everyday interactions. In the grocery store, I watched an elderly woman struggle to reach a high shelf. A young man, tattoos covering his arms, paused his own shopping to help her. The warmth of that simple act seemed to glow, and I wondered if he knew how that moment of kindness might ripple through time. But I also saw the darkness. On the bus, a harried mother snapped at her young son, her words sharp with impatience. The boy's face crumpled, and I felt the weight of that moment, knowing how such small cruelties could compound over a lifetime. The urgency to share my message grew with each passing day. I started small, looking for openings in everyday conversations. When a coworker complained about a difficult client, I gently suggested considering the client's perspective. "You never know what battles someone else is fighting," I said, thinking of the tapestries of human lives I'd witnessed. A little compassion can go a long way. At a neighborhood barbecue, I overheard a heated political discussion threatening to boil over into anger. I stepped in, reminding them that beneath our differences, we all shared the same hopes and fears. "In the end," I said, choosing my words carefully, "we're all just trying to do our best with the time we have." As I navigated this new reality, I couldn't help but wonder how my experience compared to other reported near-death encounters. I dove into research, poring over accounts from people who claimed to have glimpsed the afterlife. While many described a sense of peace and unconditional love, few spoke of the judgment I'd witnessed. Had they simply not been shown that aspect? Or was my experience truly unique? As I waited in line at my local coffee shop, I noticed a man in his mid-30s, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor. When he fumbled for his wallet, coins scattering across the floor, I helped him gather them. Our eyes met, and I felt a surge of compassion. "Rough day?" I asked. We ended up sharing a table. He introduced himself as Mark, a former accountant who had recently lost his job. His voice trembled as he spoke of his crumbling marriage and overwhelming sense of failure. I listened, my heart aching for him. Almost without thinking, I said, "I recently had an experience that changed everything for me. Would you like to hear about it?" Mark was skeptical at first, but as I shared, his expression shifted from doubt to curiosity. I spoke of the overwhelming love I had witnessed, the fairness in judgment, and the importance of our choices. When I finished, he whispered, "I've been thinking about ending it all. But hearing this, it's like a light in the darkness. Thank you." That conversation was just the beginning. Word spread and people began seeking me out. I navigated a delicate balance, sharing without overwhelming, offering hope without sugarcoating the responsibility. As my message reached more ears, I noticed changes. A cutthroat business owner began offering fair wages and second chances. Teenagers started a community garden in a neglected lot. But with influence came opposition. Religious leaders felt threatened. Self-help gurus saw their empires crumbling. Anonymous threats appeared in my mailbox. Yet for every voice raised against me, 10 more sought me out. A community formed around the shared knowledge, united by understanding the impact of their choices. I reflected on the consequences for those who rejected the message. It wasn't about punishment, but a self-imposed isolation from humanity. Those who clung to selfishness found themselves increasingly alone. A wealthy CEO who had built his fortune on exploitation doubled down on his cutthroat tactics. I watched as his employees left, his family distanced themselves, and his network crumbled. The consequences weren't fire and brimstone, but a life devoid of genuine connection and purpose. As the ripples of my message spread, I began to notice subtle changes in those who truly embraced it. At first, it was small things, a softening of expressions, a gentler tone in conversations, a moment of pause before reacting. But as weeks turned into months, the transformations became more profound. Sarah, my best friend since college, started volunteering at a local homeless shelter. She confided in me, "Hannah, it's like I see everyone differently now. Each person I meet, I can't help but wonder about their journey, their struggles. It's changed how I interact with the world." In the grocery store, I overheard a young man apologizing to a cashier for his impatience. The cashier's surprised smile lit up her entire face. At the local park, I witnessed a diverse group discussing how to live with an eternal perspective. "It's about recognizing the ripple effect of our choices," an elderly woman explained. The long-term impact revealed itself in unexpected ways. Crime rates in our town began to drop. the local animal shelter reported a surge in adoptions and volunteers. A group of teenagers started a mentoring program for at-risk youth. Even my sister Emily, who had initially suggested I might be suffering from post-traumatic stress, began to open up about her own spiritual questions. But with these positive changes came a weight of responsibility that I hadn't anticipated. The burden of influencing others' eternal destinies felt overwhelming at times. Late at night, I would lie awake, my mind racing with the potential consequences of my actions. I started keeping a journal, documenting the changes I observed and my own internal struggles. Not everyone embraced the message, of course. Skepticism and ridicule became familiar companions. At a dinner party, I overheard acquaintances mocking my experience. Their laughter stung, but I remembered the words I had been given. Tell them that my grace is available to all, but they must choose to accept it. I realized then that my role wasn't to convince, but to offer a choice. One particularly poignant example was Jack, a local business owner who approached me weeks after hearing me speak. He confessed to years of tax evasion. After hearing your story, I couldn't shake the feeling that it mattered. I've come clean to the IRS and I'm facing the consequences. It's scary, but I feel lighter somehow. As I observed these changes, I reflected on the profound revelations about the afterlife that my experience had unveiled. The intricate tapestry of human lives, the weight of seemingly insignificant choices, the delicate balance of justice and mercy. These were concepts that defied simple explanation. I found myself constantly in awe of the complexity of divine judgment and how it differed from our human understanding of right and wrong. As I reflect on my journey from ordinary woman to divine messenger, the weight of what I've witnessed overwhelms me. The final judgment, revealed in all its profound reality, has altered the very fabric of existence. Every soul's story, every choice, every ripple of impact, all laid bare before God's throne. I think of the countless lives I've encountered since my return, each face etched with potential for transformation, each heart carrying eternal consequences. To you, dear viewer, I extend an invitation. Consider your life's impact. The judgment awaits us all, but so does boundless grace. Imagine your life as a tapestry. What pattern will you weave before it's complete? Will you embrace this truth and live knowing each moment shapes your eternal destiny?